Good. Good.
Yeah, it looks like we're live on YouTube. Let me just make sure Zoom is recording. Are you signed into Zoom? Yeah, I think you have to hit the record button from here. If you're. Okay, we're opened. Oh, it's right in the middle, sorry. Okay. Can you confirm we're on YouTube? Sure. 2 minutes, yeah.
Aaron, how are you?
I'm probably.
You never know. You never know.
Looks like we're muted. Okay, commissioners, we should be good to go.
We're ready? All right. Welcome to Planning and Zoning Meeting, July 13th, 2023. We will begin. Let's see, everybody's here that's supposed to be here tonight. So welcome all commissioners. We need to begin with an adoption of the agenda. So would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved.
And all right, Gavin moved and Aaron seconded that everybody in favor of our agenda.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I did say the date, but I can say it again. But Kenny and Heather are excused tonight. And Kenny wishes he were here instead of where he is, but it's okay. All right, so Marie, did you get that we approved the agenda? Oh. All right, I forgot about that. We will have the pledge by Gavin and a prayer by Teresa.
Right, after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful at this time for the opportunity that we have to meet as citizens of North Logan City. We're grateful that we could live in a beautiful part of the world. We're grateful for the opportunity that we have to live around good people. We ask you that might bless us this night, that we might have civility in our discussions, that we may be able to listen to and make decisions and do those things that would be best for the citizens that we serve. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Gavin and Teresa. All right, we have no minutes that we need to approve. So let's go on to Scott from follow-up issues.
Yeah, so just a couple of updates, follow up on previous meetings. Last night at City Council, the council did approve the general plan amendment for the transportation master plan. Had a couple of those minor amendments and some updates before we went forward with our general plan rewrite that we wanted to clarify and bring up to date before we move forward. So that did get adopted, just so you're aware. And in regards to the draft text amendment regarding accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals, conditional use permits, staff is still looking at a few things, doing some research, looking at best practices in regards to the question about if a accessory dwelling unit were to be permitted, how do we make sure that it stays available for long-term rental? And still allow for short-term rentals as a property right. So that's still something we're looking at. There's just a little bit of limitation on staff time to get that back in front of you this month, but we'll probably bring that back sometime next month or the following when we have time. It's getting busy with a couple other things that we're working on, but just so you know, that's why that's not on the agenda for additional discussion tonight. And then lastly, you might have seen an email come across this last couple of weeks for a meeting invitation to the Hopkins Accessory Dwelling Unit Appeal hearing. That is a follow-up hearing following your action to add more context into the record. So having done so, the record has now been provided to the Administrative Appeals Hearing Officer, who will be reviewing those facts and findings that we had gone through together as part of that additional discussion on appeal. So you're welcome to attend. It's August 22nd, 1 p.m. in this room. You're not, required to attend, but if you'd like to come, you're welcome to and stay in the loop. But that's where that item is, and that's the next step in the process there. Those are the only follow-up items I have for you tonight.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Then let's move on to item number 1, a public hearing and a potential recommendation regarding the city initiated zoning text amendment to implement residential and non-residential landscaping requirements for new development. An ordinance required to qualify North Logan City residents for the recently adopted State of Utah Landscape Conversion Initiative Program. So let me read the instructions for a public hearing. Before you begin, please state your name for the record. Please speak into the microphone so that your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you are also speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairman for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the Planning Commission. It is not a time to ask questions and expect dialogue between yourself and the commission or city staff. Please address your comments to the commission, not to the public. The commission might ask questions about your comments in order for them to better understand you. If you have questions or need to discuss an issue, please meet with the Planning Commission meeting members or the appropriate city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 2-minute limit applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the commission. Written comments, if a copy is provided, become a part of the public record, but are not included in the minutes of the meeting. All right. So Scott, do you want to give us a little background on this?
Yep. So we reviewed this in work session at our last meeting, but to distill this down to just basic terms, the state of Utah recently enacted legislation that basically put funds out there for what they're calling landscape conversion incentive programs. Those programs are generally administered through local water conservation districts, but also the state itself has a program for municipalities to take advantage of, so long as they've adopted an ordinance for minimum landscaping requirements in residential and commercial areas. That's a prerequisite that we adopt that ordinance before our community is eligible for those landscape conversion incentive programs. So what it means is we need to put some standards into our code, minimum standards, in the form of an ordinance. And when we've done so, we can pass that along to the state. The state will verify we're in compliance and say you're good to go. And then the rest of the community existing members can take advantage of that program. The program in a nutshell is if you want to swap your frontage for water-wise landscaping, you can do so, and the state will give you a rebate to help pay for those conversions of landscaping. So the biggest thing is they're trying to get away from turf grass, pop-up sprinklers, and they're wanting to go to more of a drip irrigated, water-wise type of a landscaping. So it's a program, you're not obligated to do that, but our existing members of the community could take advantage of it and get some change back in their pocket to make that conversion. In essence, the ordinance that we need to adopt needs to achieve the following items. This is on your second page of the staff report in these 2 bullet points. So in residential areas, the area within the public right of way between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk, otherwise known as the park strip, shall not be landscaped with lawn or turf. This is for all new development. Okay, keep that in mind. This is anybody coming from this point forward would have to comply with these minimum standards. Okay, so all of our park strips for new development will not have turf. They will be able to landscape them, but just not with turf grass. Okay. B, lawn or turf area shall not be less than 8 feet wide at its narrowest point. What that's trying to get at is they're wanting, if you're going to have turf, they want to make sure that it's usable area and that it's used for, throwing a ball around or kicking a ball or enjoying a picnic or something to that extent. And so they're saying 8 feet
And that means 8 feet anywhere on the property, right?
anywhere on the property. Well, that's correct. Anywhere on the property. So as you're making, different landscaped areas, they want to make sure that if you're going to turf that area, that it's at least 8 feet wide.
So does that wording come exactly from the state or,
It does.
okay,
Yep.
all right.
These are the minimums. We're just adopting the minimums that they're requiring. As far as this is concerned, there's one thing I do need to bring up later on, but I'll get to that here in a minute. And then lastly, in residential areas, lawn or turf area shall not exceed 50% of the total landscaped area for front and side yards. Lawn or turf limitations do not apply to small residential lots with less than 250 square feet of landscaped area. So front and sides, 50%, that's the maximum amount of turf that you could have. Doesn't say anything about the backyard, but also for townhomes, for example, with small front areas, they're saying that those don't count. You can go ahead and put turf in those small front yards. Okay, so that's residential areas, minimums. Number 2, maximum lawn or turf in non-residential areas. So this is all commercial, institutional, industrial, manufacturing, all non-residential areas. This is the minimum for those areas. Within common area or open space landscapes, lawn or turf areas shall not exceed 20% of the total landscaped area outside of active recreation areas. So you can have recreation areas and those can be completely turfed, but outside of those active recreation areas, you're limited to 20% of that area being turf landscaping. B, lawn or turf areas shall not be less than 8 feet wide at their narrowest point. Same thing for the residential above. And then lastly, the area within the public right of way between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk, otherwise known as the park strip, shall not be landscaped with lawn or turf. So same thing as above. Okay. Those are the minimum standards the state wants municipalities to adopt in order to be eligible for that conversion program. So that's what we're injecting into our code through various sections. So the staff report does have the red lines that are necessary to our code to inject these requirements. And the areas in our code that are affected are sections 12C, 1016, 1050, 1060, 1100, 12D, and 13H. Each of these sections touches on landscape requirements between residential and commercial. So that's why there's red lines in these different sections. The one thing that I've recommended as staff to the Planning Commission and City Council above these minimum standards is that we clarify where street trees are required. Right now, under our existing ordinance, street trees are required anywhere within the city center zoning classifications and all of our commercial and institutional, manufacturing, industrial, all of our non-residential areas, those are street treed as well. My recommendation is that we just adopt street trees as a requirement throughout the city. So any new development would be required to put street trees in their front park strips. The reason why I recommend that is because there's countless studies and examples of how street trees improve many aspects of a neighborhood, from the urban heat island effect, cooling down your streets, water conservation, property value is maintained. It also helps to screen from one home to the next. So, if one home is maybe nicer kept than the others, it helps to blend everything through that area. One area of town that it's particularly my favorite that does incorporate the street tree requirement, and this was done just as an election by the developer at the time, is, I just wanted to go into the street view to show you what that looks like. Let's see, get my bearings here. So this is 8th East, 2650 North. It's behind North Park Elementary School. This particular subdivision was put in about 20 years ago. So you can kind of see what it looks like when it's mature. But this is a neighborhood that does incorporate street trees. This is a unique cross section. It's more of a low impact cross section where there's not a high back curb. But this can be done in different types of cross sections. And you can kind of notice as you transition from this subdivision that does incorporate street trees to a subdivision that's about 35 years old. This is where we then transition from a wider park strip to a more narrow park strip and no street trees. So here's the subdivision with. And here we transition into a subdivision without. There's still great trees, but they're more interior to individual lots. Some people have gone ahead and planted them on their own, but the majority of this subdivision does not. And you can kind of tell just the different aesthetic going from one to the other. I grew up in this neighborhood, so that's why I use it as an example, because I remember when that new subdivision came in, all the street trees were planted. I thought it was interesting. It was interesting that they had wider park strips. Anyways, there's a lot of examples of why the street trees they provide a lot of benefit to the city. Now, there is cost of maintenance and upkeep, and they can be problematic if you plant the wrong trees. But the city does have a tree manual with very specific tree species that are allowed or disallowed based on the width of your park strip. I also had spent some time down in Arizona, which is a very warm place, and I've seen neighborhoods with and without street trees, and the difference is just night and day. When you think about where you want to go trick or treating with your kids, the street trees make it a little bit of a better ambiance, but it just is a better aesthetic quality. So we have subdivisions where in the past it hasn't been required, but they've gone ahead and done it, and you can see through many years of development and maturity, it just provides a higher quality standard. So it's my recommendation that we do that, but it's up to you guys if you want to also inject that as a minimum landscaping standard, in addition to the state minimums that we have to qualify for the incentive program.
So I have to tell you, Scott, I listened to a lecture
Uh-huh.
from an arborist on trees, and they mentioned all those perks, plus there's less crime in areas where there's trees and less anxiety for the residents there. I mean, it was really interesting to listen to.
It just makes a better built environment, a more attractive area to go on walks, nicer neighborhood.
Mhm.
So that's the one item I wanted to bring up that is in addition to the state minimums, that's part of this recommendation. Commissioner, do you have a question?
Yeah, a comment, I guess, in our area, in the subdivision I'm in, the irrigation water lines run right through that area where there would be park strip.
Mhm.
And I'm saying, are there also utilities that may be running down through there? You put a tree there, like I did,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden the tree was growing over the pipe and broke the pipe.
Yeah.
So then they had to go around it, and I'm just concerned about that kind of a thing.
Yeah,
happening.
that's problematic. If the design isn't correct, it is a problem. What we're saying is new development would be required to do this, and the park strips would not be where the utilities are. The utilities are behind in an easement behind the sidewalk most typically. But you're right. For an existing neighborhood, those would be some changes you'd have to make in order to plant some trees there to do it successfully. Yep. This is not a requirement for older neighborhoods or established neighborhoods. It would be for new neighborhoods going forward. Of course, if you want to go and plant a tree in your park strip, you're welcome to. The city has guidelines if you'd like to do so. But you would probably want to take into consideration what is in your park strip if there's irrigation lines and other things that would be a problem to do so. Okay. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to go through the red lines. It's a longer red line because there's many ordinances that are affected by it, but I've injected language into our subdivision ordinance to capture the requirement at the time new development comes in. But also throughout our standards for residential and commercial, whether it's in a city center or in other commercial or manufacturing areas of town. Okay.
I thought I looked this over good, but I missed the tree part.
Oh,
I'm
it's there.
sorry, I know, I can't see it.
Scott can probably tell. us.
So-
He read it.
There's a couple of sections.
Yeah.
There's the street tree ordinance at the very end, which I actually didn't have to touch that much. Because it's unchanged. If you are going to put
Yeah.
in street trees, you
Oh,
abide by
street
that
trees and
ordinance.
development.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the subdivision ordinance is concerned, there's two different sections in our subdivision ordinance. One is applicable to residential, the other is applicable to non-residential.
Mhm.
And there's a portion in those sections that talk about the improvements that are required. So this is on page 31 of the staff report and page 28 of the red line.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So these are the subdivision improvements required in a residential subdivision. And you'll see the red line has injected the street tree requirement.
Great.
And it's the same red line for the commercial section as well. So it's now a requirement at subdivision. When a subdivision comes into the city, they go through a concept plan, but then they also go through a development plan and a preliminary plat. And the development plan would then show where those street trees would be planted, the species that they anticipate using. And then we can review it to make sure it meets our standards within the tree manual. Okay.
Okay. Aaron?
Question is, well, comment, can you enlarge that in
Yes.
my 4 eyes? Thank you.
So this is the section, if we pop up just a page, these are the subdivision improvements required in a residential subdivision. And it is then added to the list of those improvements.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we'll open our public hearing. If anyone might like to make comments, now's your chance. Okay, we'll close our public hearing and we'll discuss. Commissioners, any other questions, any thoughts, any feelings?
I would just make a motion that we approve the changes.
Okay, Gavin, were you gonna say something before that question? No,
Yeah, I could do it before or after. but-
before we make a motion?
You can do it after you make a motion. You can have discussion after. You just need
Okay.
a second, but
Okay,
I second it.
all right. So
I'll second.
Teresa moved and Heron seconded to make it a positive recommendation to the staff, to the city council on the landscape ordinance. All right, do we vote before we
No.
hear it?
no,
Okay,
you can-
so let's hear. what you have to
Yeah,
say.
so I like the idea. I like the reason why we're doing it. I did my front yard the same way because I didn't want to spend money on water. Yes. And so I'll repeat. So I like where this is going. I like the purposes and the intent of it, and I did my own front yard this way. My only concern is I don't feel as if the city should be telling people they have to. So that's my only concern. I don't know if anybody shares that concern.
Okay. Teresa, you want to say something?
Well, I think it's okay because I care about water and I care about us having enough water. So I think it's okay for the city to do it.
It's okay. We don't have to agree.
All right. Any other comment, Heron?
Gavin and Teresa's comment. I understand where Gavin's coming from. Having my own property and other things but I would like to see the uniformity in the city. That's where I would like to go with it. And so in this instance, I think it's a good thing. So
Also, I think to qualify for our,
Allow people to get the
allow
help.
people to get help, we have to come up with this idea. So I appreciate your comments, Gavin. I know that, but I also like the streets that are lined with trees, and it's good to have the new residences that are built, this guideline. So I think, are we ready to vote? All right, we've had a motion and it's been seconded. All those in favor of passing on a positive recommendation?
I,
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, nay, Gavin. Right, so Teresa, Heron, aye, Gavin, nay, and Nan will do an aye. Okay? All right, thank you. Let's move on to number 2. Discussion and possible action to renew and amend an expired conditional use permit for a small multi-unit storage development at approximately 200 north, 200 west. Scott?
Okay, commissioners, this is going back to late last year. We had some discussions on storage units. This is prior to Commissioner Payne's time. And I think also it was new
was
for
there.
you, Commissioner Tyre, right? But you were there.
I heard the discussion, yeah.
Yeah, so
You were here.
the city, there was a couple of storage unit projects that the city had approved back in 21 that didn't really go anywhere. And so when we noticed that those projects were stagnant, we looked at the timing and in the conditional use permit ordinance and said, it looks like it's been a year. It looks like these are now expired, so we'll issue the expiration. And then at the time, staff took a minute to say, now that we've had a couple of projects expire, do we want to continue to allow for these types of uses? Is this something we want going forward? So we opened up the discussion, a text amendment was drafted and ultimately passed where we pulled storage units out of our ordinances as an allowed use. At least until we go through a general plan process and understand the trajectory and the long-term vision for the community, but especially our commercial areas and industrial areas. During that time, one of the two conditional use permits that we issued an expiration notice on indicated that, hey, we are still working on this. We're not completely dormant, and we have made some substantial work in the form of engineering and design work behind the scenes that we believe constitutes substantial work, which is a term in our conditional use permit ordinance for whether or not it can expire or not. So what basically let me go back and open the staff report here. What we said is, well, let's take a look at the ordinance, sat down with the developer and said, our ordinance does say that substantial work should be completed within a year, otherwise the permit expires. However, substantial work is not a defined term. And the city has an opinion, the developer has another opinion. And we looked at this and said, you know what, we don't know who's right. The city might be right in saying that, we haven't seen much progress in the form of a subdivision and a building permit being issued, but also the developer, I think has a very credible argument saying that substantial work was done. Funding for engineering isn't cheap, and they were going through that process. So we said, look, the code now says no more storage units, but you do have a conditional use permit. And the only way that we could see maybe allowing this to go forward is if we were to extend the existing permit. But before we extend it, let's take a look at it. Let's see if maybe we can work together on an outcome that is favorable, but also put some very specific terms on an extension as to when it would expire if they didn't move forward with that project. So in the staff report, the staff does recommend that we go ahead and extend the conditional use permit, but subject to some conditions to clarify the expiration date. So I'm going to kind of jump through here. This is for everybody who's curious. This is located behind Main Street along 2nd West. This is the GMC Cadillac Chevrolet dealership on Main. And this is the 10-acre parcel that the applicant owns to the north. The original proposal was to put 5 acres of storage units along this south portion, and then subdivide the north portion into a couple of individual commercial lots for potential future development. During the original approval of that conditional use permit, there was discussion between the Planning Commission and City Council of the configuration and how those storage units would be configured on this parcel. And there was a desire to preserve frontage on 2nd West. Now that was discussion, but it was never made a condition at the time. But it was a discussion between Planning Commission and City Council that they worked through the subdivision process to perhaps make that change. So that original proposal, let me show you what that looked like. Looked like this. So here's 2nd West. There's a GMC dealership over this way. And they had originally proposed to configure the storage units on this south side with a drive aisle coming in and then a couple of tiers of storage facility buildings here. The original discussion was that we preserve 2nd West for potential commercial uses. 2nd West currently is kind of a dead end, nowhere road, very little access, very little frontage, very little traffic. But that is not what will be on 2nd West in the future. So 2nd West is a regionally significant road. It will connect north-south between our communities and continue on, and will be a bypass of Main Street at a future point. There will be traffic on this street. There is a desire to perhaps preserve those frontages in the eventuality that there will be much more traffic. And so what we said was, hey, let's work with the developer. They were willing to look at it again and say, let's see if there's another configuration that we can make work, but that it would also be preferred by the city. And ultimately, this second configuration was what was brought forward. So what it does is it preserves a drive access on the south side with more of the storage tucked in behind. So it's kind of along 1st West. There's not a 1st West street, but it's between 2nd West and where 1st West would be, with the GMC dealership kind of down in this southeast corner. So it tucks it back in the rear. We do have one aisle of storage here, but it preserves the frontage here for maybe two larger or more commercial spaces. So this is a configuration that we said that is more in alignment with what the discussion had originally had hoped. The applicant was okay to move forward with this proposal. So as part of this extension, staff recommends that we would conditionally approve the permit to be extended based on this configuration. And then some specific conditions, and I'd just like to go through them real quick. So number one, a minimum of a 20-foot landscape setback must be installed and maintained along the frontage of any public street. That is just a standard requirement of all commercial development, so that's being added. Number two, a landscape berm, a minimum of 3 feet in height must be installed and maintained within the required landscape setback. That was a requirement for all storage units when we still had that language in the code. Number three, a minimum of 1 tree per 30 feet of frontage shall be planted within the required landscape setback and shall meet all size requirements found in 12C 1101. Again, that was a standard that was required for all storage units in our language before it was stricken from the code. Number four, all landscape setbacks are required to be irrigated by an automatic sprinkler irrigation system. Number five, all structures must be constructed on a footing or foundation that is in compliance with the current building code. So we want permanent structures. We don't want storage pods being just placed on the property. Okay. In addition to those standard requirements that would be required of all storage units, an additional condition is recommended that a solid screening and security fence, which does not allow for viewing into the fenced area, shall be installed in a manner that encloses the entirety of the storage facility. Automatic gates may be allowed where needed for access and egress, and then the fence may utilize the rear wall portions of the storage units as part of the fencing perimeter, but the fencing must be no more or less than 6 feet in height. Fencing design, materials, and colors shall be reviewed at the time of design review approval. Okay, so that's a recommendation. And then number 7 is more specific to the timeline as far as when it would expire if it doesn't move forward. So the conditional use permit shall expire if the following items have not been completed by July 13th of 25. So that within 2 years, these things need to be done. So a subdivision of the subject parcel, which creates the development lot upon which the storage unit project is proposed to be constructed, shall have been approved by the city and recorded with the county recorder's office. All applicable subdivision improvements shall have been installed and inspected per the requirements contained within the city's subdivision ordinance. 3, design review of the proposed structure and site improvement shall have been approved by the city. And D, a building permit shall have been issued for the first structure to begin constructing. And then number 8 is if, for example, they obtain the building permit, but then they sit on it for a year, we would say you've got 12 months to start constructing after you've received a permit in hand.
So it's like 3 years.
It's a 3-year window for them to move forward. And that's, that's reasonable. I think that's doable. Those are the conditions that I would recommend if we are going to extend this permit that we would instigate as a city. But I do want to give the applicant an opportunity to speak if they would like. They are here and are welcome to speak as part of their application for this extension.
All right.
Okay.
Let's.
Thank you, Trevor Sharp. We just wanted to express appreciation to North Logan for actually working this project with us. I think it comes out to be a much better design than we actually had. And quite frankly, we didn't know there was going to be an expansion of 200 West. So I think that is a much better design with hopefully some good access along 200, which will be beneficial to us too, to get people there. Will then also be beneficial to the city as well as maybe have some larger facility commercial buildings out front. That would be better for, customer service and whatnot. So appreciate Scott and everybody and the staff taking the effort to work with us on that, but we're totally happy with everything. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Hey, I've been here through all of this discussion and I was really happy to read when I read what you had done as a staff and worked with Mr. Sharp. I'm all for this, so I really don't have to discuss anything else on my end, but let's hear what everybody else has to say.
I just have a question. I'm sure it's like, I do drive on that road every once in a while. It's an interesting road. So is there like a plan for when that's going to be
improved.
Yeah.
So as part of the subdivision, this is raw land, right? It's 10 acres of raw land.
Yeah.
So before they could move forward with any development, they would have to subdivide the property first. The subdivision process requires that minimum improvements are made to the roadway that accesses the property. So as they subdivide this property, those improvements have to be installed to the city standard and inspected. That's part of this 2-year timeline that be accomplished, because we won't issue a building permit unless those
Until-
improvements are
So you have the
completed
access.
prior.
So are they, because right now you can go all the way along there to the apartments,
Yep.
farther north. So would they be required to take care of the road from 1800 to their thing, or from 1800 to 2200?
So it depends on how they subdivide the property, but if they subdivide this piece off where the storage units are
Right.
proposed on this, this interior portion and then on this length
Uh-huh.
here, they would be required to install the improvements along the frontage of that subdivision.
Just that far then?
If they were to subdivide just the one lot, but if they were to subdivide those other 2 larger lots, then they would need to do the full
Only on their
on the east side of the
there, right.
road,
So
a
it'd
half
go
foot standard.
skinny road, then normal road, then skinny road,
It would.
Mhm.
with a big
But-
ditch over on the other side.
Right.
That's what I was-
You have to be careful when you drive down that road. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Comment, how are they going to mitigate that canal on the west? Is that any problem or any?
It will be a problem for when the property further to the west develops.
Mhm.
Yeah.
but not for this company.
We'll have to look at it. So when the subdivision is submitted to us and they bring forward a development plan, their construction documents, we'll see just how far east that canal might be. If they're able to fit their half-width standard improvements on their half width, then they would be able to do so. There might be some communication coordination between the city and the adjacent property owners that we'll have to look at that point in time. Yeah, we don't know the full extent until more detail and engineering is put into the design and the actual construction documents going forward.
But I'm like you, Nan, I really like the new plan. I think it's great. And when you drive down there, you think that fits. So I'm
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yes. and
It
I'm-
does tuck those units kind of in this rearmost portion where very little eyes will see it, but also preserves that opportunity for commercial
Yeah.
economic development opportunity. We've talked about this. We have limited commercial land, and where possible, we'd like to make sure we leverage it to the highest extent.
Scott, is the road portion for their eventually going, when this goes clear through? Is that going to be a normal size road? 60 feet?
I'd have to look at the transportation master plan, but it might be an 80-foot right of way, as it is regionally significant. So I'd have to look. I'm not positive on the width. But it is, like I mentioned, regionally significant. It's going to handle a lot of traffic at some point.
Okay,
Mhm.
because I was wondering, that's going to cut into their property, and will this plan still work with that much?
We'll make sure that when they do subdivide, we have enough right of way
Mhm.
on their half of the road to ensure a full width right of way can go through north to south. Again, we kind of wait for the other development on the west to then provide the other half width and that right of way to be dedicated when they subdivide. But for the time being, we'll ensure there's enough on the half width on their side of the street on the east side before they can move forward.
Then for the question, will their half the road go from the center of the present road or from the east side of the present road there?
We'll have to see. So you can kind of see down here where the existing right of way line has been drawn. We'll have to look to see how it lines up. It
Okay.
might not be evenly split between these 2 parcels, but we don't know those details until very specific plans are submitted with the subdivision. But what I can tell you is there will be enough on the half width based on where that road,
Okay.
the trajectory of the road will go to make sure it will fit.
And you've talked with Mr. Sharp and all of this, you understand,
This is all part of the subdivision ordinance, so it's required of everybody who develops.
right?
Yeah.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, just when not knowing much about this one from previous, I think it's a good compromise and to avoid contention over what's significant and isn't significant. And it
Yeah.
sounds like both parties are happy, and so congratulations to the city and for working well with them. So.
I think it's also good to add dates on a permit like this, so we
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Just so the planning commission knows, as part of our draft text amendment that is not on the agenda tonight, but that we had discussed last week about the conditional use permits, accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals. in that text amendment, it does clarify what substantial work means. It does add those dates. So we're taking basically what we've learned from this application. It's now part of those text amendments to improve our code. So we're learning and improving as we go. That language is not applicable yet because we haven't adopted that. And we're not sure how that will end up in its final form. But it is a component I think needs to be cleaned up regardless of what we decide on, short-term rentals, conditional use permits, accessory dwelling units. So
Okay.
we're working to clean it up and it'll make its way through at some point in some fashion.
Great.
Okay.
I think we're ready to make a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve this number 2 for the discussion of possible action for this development on that piece of property.
Great.
4-08-0015.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Heron moved and Gavin seconded that we make a positive recommendation to move forward with this.
Commissioners,
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
it's
we
a
need to
renewal of it's a
real
renewal.
quick before we finalize our motion and our action on this, if I could make a recommendation to the commissioner that made the motion, it would be very helpful to make sure that we adopt the facts, findings, and conditions of the staff report. So incorporate that into your motion. So it's part of the record that what is in the staff report does reflect your facts, findings, and conditions of the
Staff
If we
recommendation.
make a positive recommendation
not-
that
it's-
includes all of these staff
Recommended.
recommendations.
All right.
And commissioners, that's a good point. This is not a recommendation. You are the land use authority on conditional use
Alright.
permit, so you will
Okay,
vote to
yes.
approve or deny.
So you want to
You
make,
approve
yes, so you want to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit
for
for this parcel of land. According, so all of these staff recommendations are included in there.
Oh, see if this comes out, sort of. I move that we
Approve?
approve of this, thank you, approve this
Is it an extension? Is it a-
Conditional-
You would approve
conditional
an
use permit for this property development on Second West. And that we include all of the staff recommendations for going forward.
recommendations, facts, findings, and conditions
Thanks to facts, findings, and conditions
in the staff
that
report.
are
That are in the staff report.
in the staff report. How's that? Is that close?
That'll work.
All right.
All right.
And I will second that.
Okay,
Yes.
it's been moved and seconded that we approve this conditional use permit with all of the staff facts and findings and reports. Along with it, all in favor, any opposed?
We're not gonna make any motions anymore.
All right, thank you,
Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Trevor.
let's go on to number 3. Discussion and possible recommendation regarding the preliminary plat and development plan associated with the Linden Lane subdivision. An 8-lot density determinant subdivision. Approximately 3,100 north, 1,200 east. Scott.
Okay, so this one is a subdivision you guys have looked at just in the recent past. This one's moving along pretty regularly. We're not having any holdups, so it's good. Let me open up the staff report here. This particular project is located on 3,100 north and about 12th east. That intersection, this parcel splits that intersection. It's in the half-acre zone, R120. And the developer is looking to divide this with the density determinant subdivision method, which allows for some of the lots to be a little bit bigger and some to be a little bit smaller, but the average of those lots meet that minimum standard of half an acre. And what we're doing now, so this has already gone through a concept plan approval, and now we're looking at it from a development plan and a preliminary plat standpoint. So it's a little bit more detail on, where are the utilities being connected? What is the drainage? What is the water retention? Where's the sewer? Where's the water? Where's the secondary irrigation? Those types of things. It's not as granular as construction documents and final plat, but it's getting to the point where we know generally where things are connecting and how they're connecting and how things are going to come together. Okay. So I'm going to hop through here real quick and show you the development plan. And it's kind of hard to see from a distance, but what it is looking at is it lays out the lots. It shows the improvements that are required. So we've got curb gutter sidewalk along the frontages of 12th East and on 3100. Now, some of these improvements were already installed as part of the 3100 project back when it went through back in 2020. But there are additional required improvements that the developer will be doing. There is a canal trail along the eastern bank of the canal, which is required of all new subdivisions. And there's also a 10-foot gravel path within that 15-foot easement that's set aside for that path to occur. The subdivision is kind of split into north and south. And so the stormwater drainage runs into a northern basin up here on the north. And then these southern 3 lots have their own small basin here on the south. We've got water and sewer already in the road, so they will be connecting to those existing pieces of infrastructure. And there's also secondary irrigation line that runs north and south here as well, providing secondary to each of these lots. So that's where we're kind of getting into the details. We verified there's enough area in the storm detention basins to meet the minimum standard for the 90th percentile 100-year storm event. That confuses me. That's an engineering term, but I know that their calculations show that they've got enough capacity in their detention basin. That's reviewed by your engineer, of course. There were a couple of conditions of approval from the city council on their let me find it here. I'm trying to talk and move at the same time on their concept plan. So number one, they were required to provide a water conservation plan with their development plan. What that basically is showing us how their secondary water is going to work, how much water is used on those lots, making sure they're dedicating enough water rights to the city to make that work. And so they have shown that they have secondary irrigation along the frontages of each of those lots. They will be dedicating the appropriate amount of water shares to the city. But we will look at the construction documents for the specifics as to how that system will actually be put together and tie off of that infrastructure. Okay, so that was submitted. We know that a sidewalk needed to be installed along the full frontage of 12th East. That is being shown on this development plan. Same thing with curb and gutter on 3100 on the south side, and then all of 1200 East as well. There's that existing asphalt path on the north side of 3100 that was installed when the 3100 went in. So that is not being required at this time because it's already existing. But the rest of those pedestrian improvements will be part of the plan as shown on the development plan. They're required to submit a street lighting plan, which they're showing a street light there at the intersection, which is meeting what we had asked them to provide as far as street lighting is concerned. Now, there are some folks in this area of town that don't really love street lighting. They would prefer it to be maybe a little bit more dark. So we just asked that there be one street light at the corner of the intersection just for any pedestrian crossings, and we've left it at that. So that's what's shown on the plan. We see our gradage and draining plan has been incorporated. And then the last condition was a bit unique. So this condition was actually tacked on by the city council, where they wanted to have the developer explore what it would take to fit a roundabout at this intersection, knowing that at some point a roundabout might be necessary to accommodate the traffic in this area. It is actually on a regional plan, so we know it is probably something in the not too distant future when the traffic demands that there's a better intersection. But because they're developing now, it's the right time to explore it and make sure we have enough room for it, even if that intersection doesn't get built for several years. So we said, okay, we'll look at that as part of the development plan. We'll see how that fits in. So that was a condition that they explore as part of the development plan. And the last page of their development plan does that exploration. So you can kind of see here, especially I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. We've put basically an overlay of a roundabout that is about the same size as the two roundabouts further to the west on this same 3100 North. To see how it would fit. Can we fit it in, yes or no? And what we found is there's a little bit of land that we would need as far as additional right of way to fit roughly, a similar size roundabout in this location. So what this basically means is the subdivision can comply with all of our subdivision standards, which you can see in the exhibit just above. This is what would be required of any subdivision if, for example, we didn't need to explore a roundabout. But, so this is, in order to develop, this is what just is the minimum that has to be done. And this is something we can ask the developer to do as what we call an exaction. So we're exacting these improvements because they're developing, this is the impact that they're creating. And so they're improving to that, to accommodate that impact. What you see down here below is what we probably would call an over request, an overstepping of what can be exacted. So this could be constituted as probably a taking of some sort to say, like, this is probably disproportionate in the exaction. And so what we're looking at, and the developer's been great to work with because they understand the need to communicate this to their lot buyers to say, this is likely going to come. Let's make sure you're on the same page before you choose to purchase this lot. Don't go landscaping in this area because it may need to be pulled out. But the city can't technically say, we're asking you formally to provide this to us at no cost, because that is disproportionate. So what we're doing is we're kind of exploring this as maybe a side agreement where we would like to go ahead and take care of this as part of the plating process, but the city may have to come to the table with some compensation to pay for the difference in cost and the difference in impact between what is shown on this exhibit and what is shown on this exhibit. So what we're looking at, we're going to work with the developer between development plan and preliminary plat, and before we get to construction documents and final plat, on if we can come to an agreement, a monetary amount that would compensate the developer for this additional impact, that we could then provide to the developer and then go ahead and incorporate that as part of this subdivision. So these lot owners know what they're getting into before time. Saves everybody a headache now and later. And the developer has been great to work through that with us. So we appreciate them doing that. But what it basically means is there's more discussion on this between now and between when the city council would approve this subdivision.
Scott, a question.
Yeah.
In order to go forward with that, do you also have to talk to those landowners on the east?
So-
haven't developed yet.
So they haven't developed yet. We're only looking at these two corners for now. When and if this roundabout were to be installed, we would need to work with these landowners to see if there's existing right of way sufficient or not. And if there's not, we'd have to work with them to compensate them for that land if need be.
Because there's getting to be more roundabouts in North Logan, which is great.
Mhm.
As I look at those two lots that are impacted, where would their driveways have to be in order to have that? Do you understand my question? Because there has to be so many feet around that roundabout. Like, do you understand? I mean,
Yep.
they have to,
How do we fit this in? That's a great question, and it's something we have been talking with. And what we anticipate seeing is we're going to have shared accesses for some of these lots. It's actually, I think, discussed here on the development plan. See if I can zoom in enough to where it's legible. Is that legible here? It's
Yeah.
still pretty small. Let me go ahead and download it so we can have a clean copy. We can zoom in. This was actually one of the things that we had requested early on in the concept plan, that they explore this with us. And they've been great to do that. There we go. See if our internet and our, that's not a ton better, but there we go. Okay, so lots 1, 2, 5, 7, and 8 will access from 12th East. Lots 3, 4, and 6 will be restricted to 3100. Let me 1, 2, 5, 7, 8. 1, 2, 5, 7, 8.
it's just because I don't,
Not the quickest of maneuvering here.
because it's really hard to see the lot numbers on any of these.
Yeah. So here's 1, 2. They will be on 12th East right here. 5, 7, 8. They will be on 12th East right here. And then lot 3, 4, and 6 will be off of 31. And so what we anticipate is there will be on the final plat, it will depict where those driveways will be allowed to cut the curb. And we will consolidate those to a single
What-
point.
Right, and the other one though, you've got that huge drainage thing right there.
right here.
I mean, that just looks like a problem to me. Because I don't know that somebody would want their house next to that draining thing, but
It's just where the access point is. So they can put their house anywhere on the lot over here, but this is where the
I know, that's
driveway-
what I'm saying though. They're gonna have to put their access on the side of that.
Yep.
Anyway, I guess like, I mean, people can work out things and they're not small lots, right? No.
No, this one, for example, is a half acre.
So they can work it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is a. They'll have to be,
It'll be looked at. So when the final plat is created, it'll show with notation where those drive accesses are allowed to be,
yeah,
and they'll be shared. So we want to limit the number of access points on and off of 12th East. 12th is an important corridor as well. It runs
So the
12 piece
will be shared too?
correct. Yep. So for example, these two lots will have a shared point kind of in the middle of their lot here. These ones will have a shared point here. And that way we don't have multiple access points with people backing out onto 12th East. It'll be more predictable with, fewer of those access points. And that's what was explored. That's what's intended by this note, and we'll follow that through. So it's on the final plat and we know exactly where. And then the lot owners also know where their access point will be. They can design, do their civil engineering how they needed. Yeah.
And
So-
those drainage areas aren't too bad. I mean, they're not.
It's not a cliff.
You can't drive over, I mean.
No.
But they've got a half
Side of it.
acre to work on it. I have a question about the canal paths.
Yep.
So who's in charge of the canal paths?
So that's a good question. Ultimately, it'll be the city that will maintain those, but we won't, stop an adjacent landowner for maybe cleaning them up or weed whacking from time to time. The canals we know through public opinion surveys that they're very important to our community. Most people are very in support of canal trails. They provide excellent north-south pedestrian connectivity, active transportation, recreation, all sorts of benefits to them. And the way that our ordinances read now is any new subdivision that is adjacent to a canal is required to provide a 15-foot easement and a path within that easement for the purpose of connecting these canal trails. It's hodgepodge, and you only pick them up when you can. We're working with owners to perhaps put those trails through on areas that are not part of new developments. There's also, an argument that there may be some prescriptive easements that exist because they've been used as trails for so many years, but they're not formalized. They're not recognized formally. So there's a lot of work to do to connect all of our canal trails and to make them a single long connected trail from one point to the next. But we collect easements and segments as development occurs. And that's a requirement for everybody going forward. So that's why it is required here. It's why it's shown here, and it will be improved by the developer. The city will ultimately be in charge of making sure that those stay passable, but we won't say no to help if those adjacent landowners want to go out and do it. Or if a Boy Scout troop wants to go out as a service project and do some weed whacking, that might be part of it.
And hopefully the landowners will know that that's
That's
how
the
it
point
is.
of this here is the plat will be very specific that this is open for public access.
Okay. good.
Scott, would you go back to that overlay with the roundabout?
Yep.
All right, explain to me what the circles are.
These are just dimensions for a circumference and a radius. And they help us understand if the circle's too tight or if it's passable by certain classes of vehicles. This particular size is not going to pass an 18-wheel semi, but how often have you ever seen an 18-wheel semi ever use this street? They can hop this center circle if need be, but it's not an everyday occurrence. So they're designed for what they're intended to be used for, but those circles just show the dimensions.
So
And they're the same size as the ones farther west.
Yeah, we use those as kind of a design standard to use.
So the outside circle or space around there,
Mhm.
is that part of the roundabout or is that?
This is
roadway.
just to help
Access
us
land
see, this is just to help us see if we were to put a roundabout here, how much land do we need in order to fit it in? And what you see in these crosshatches right here, this is the additional right of way that we believe we need to obtain in order to fit that in. So that's where we would be asking the developer to go above and beyond to dedicate those points of right of way so that in the future, when the roundabout is needed based on the traffic, it could be fit without having to go back to the neighbors and say, hey, by the way, we need to put a roundabout in here and your nice pretty tree is going to have to get cut down. And that's what we're saying here is we want to make sure everybody is well aware, well ahead of time, even before they buy the lot, that this is an eventuality.
Any other comments, questions? Are we ready to make a positive recommendation? A motion for Nick, do you want to have any, to tell us anything about this? Anything you want to say?
No.
Okay. No, if you're good with everything, we're good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it looks like it will be. Yes,
Too
yes,
many.
good. We want those trees. All right. I
I don't think they can all stay. I went and looked at it today. and I'm
This
not
is
sure
this
they
is the
can.
rare occurrence where there might be too many trees in this subdivision.
But that's
This is-
okay.
Okay, we need a motion.
I move that we give a positive recommendation regarding sub 2023-01, incorporating the staff findings as findings of fact.
A second.
I'll second that.
All right. Gavin moved and Heron second that we give a positive recommendation to the city council to a positive recommendation as we incorporate the staff findings on this Linden Lane subdivision. Is that enough for me to say?
Yeah, development plan, preliminary plat.
Development plan preliminary plat for Linden Lane. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait,
One question, were there exceptions in that?
Any conditions of approval?
Yes.
No, not really, because they just need to follow the standards going
Okay.
through until the next phase. So there's nothing unique
Okay.
that it needs to be conditioned.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hey, it's passed. Great, thank you. Let's move on to number 4. Scott, you want to tell us about number 4?
Yes. Okay, so this is another subdivision. This is a 1-lot subdivision, and then we're just looking at it from a concept plan perspective. So very early on and what this looks like. This is a piece of property. I'm going to pull open our map here. It kind of comes off of 16th East, and it's kind of long and slender. Oh, let's see, where am I at? 25, here we go. Okay. So it is this piece right here, owned by Brooke and Maurice Weiberg. So they've got a home here, and then we've got some narrow access to some additional pasture land to the rear. This particular home sits smack dab in the middle of the 25 to 2600 north master plan road connection. So this has been known for a long time that this road would connect through this general location. And so this is not a surprise to anybody that this home is in the way. But the city has been working with this particular owner on the eventuality that this is coming near. Now, the reason why it is now versus earlier or later is because the city has a very important water line infrastructure project that needs to go through this right-of-way alignment. That water infrastructure is critical to the entire city. It makes our water distribution system more robust, more capable to handle our peak demand, especially in the summer months. And it is direly needed. So the city's been working with this particular property owner to say, hey, we don't want to, if possible, go through the takings process, eminent domain. Let's see if we can negotiate a way to get this this property acquired, try to make you guys whole. Try to find a way to get this water line and this right of way acquired for this road to connect through. So what we're looking at here is kind of a partnership between the city and this property owner to subdivide this property. There is an agreement that we are working on with this property owner to pay them a portion of cash, but also to subdivide the property and leave them with a developable lot here towards the rear that they could use to either develop on or sell and look for property elsewhere as part of their total compensation for the property. So let me hop into the concept here. Well, let's look at, this is the transportation master plan, just so you guys know, this is that segment that we'll be connecting. And that's where the home is, right there at that intersection. So that's what we're talking about here. We need to acquire the right of way to let this segment connect. But here's what that concept looks like. This would be that, that right of way acquired to let that road go through. The road would actually kind of cut through here like this. But the way that this property works out, they have enough acreage that we can actually fit in a 1 acre lot here towards the rear with a developable area that meets all the zoning minimums for a lot in the RE1 subdivision. So that's what the concept is. It meets the standards for subdivision. This is early on in the concept, and we've reviewed it to say this does meet or can meet our subdivision requirements. But we need to get into more details with the development plan and the preliminary plat to look at utilities and all of those other things that would need to occur in order for this lot to be developable once the subdivision is completed. This portion here to the south would be a remainder parcel that would be held on as surplus for the city. We'll probably put it in our back pocket, and we don't know what we would do with it right away, but it would be owned by the city at that point, in addition to the right of way that would be through here. So that's the concept in a nutshell. Meets the zoning minimums, and we know that we need to get into the weeds on utility design and those types of things, but there is access to utilities out on 1600 that would likely be pulled through, in addition to our water line that would be going through. The line that goes through here would be a transmission line. We don't connect individual services off of transmission lines. So there would be an additional line, probably in the same trench, that would be brought through to provide residential service to development on this lot, but also potential future development north and south of here as well. So there's some of this longer range infrastructure planning that we're looking at as well, in addition to just this single lot here. But this area back here would become more developable when and if this road goes through. That's if those landowners decided that they wanted to develop, which they may or may not. Time will tell.
Mhm. And this is the road. The
Correct.
thing that looks like a road is where the road goes.
Correct. Yep.
So you'll have enough land to run the transmission line, but not enough to finish the road unless.
You have to get some from the other.
Yeah.
property.
Correct. We'd have to work with this landowner. Which there already are discussions. This barn here would have to go bye-bye. But at some point, when we work with them, that's when the road would potentially go through. There would be a half width improvement on this side, because this lot would have to have at least that to be developable.
Okay.
Yep.
So could the city work around the house where it currently is to put in their water thing, or does the house have to?
That's a good question. If it's like snake it along this north side right here, so if we
Yeah.
can fit it in. Most likely not, because that line needs a very big trench.
Okay,
I don't think that there's room. Yep, so those property owners are currently looking for alternatives for, moving on.
Who will, this purplish rectangle down here, to the left of the house, who will own that piece of property?
This right here,
No, go down farther left,
left.
right, that piece of property right there. No, go back up where you were.
I think he's saying where that barn is.
Where the barn
The
is.
barn, the pond, the barn, the house, the blue area. Then there's right in there.
Here,
Here,
You just keep moving
I
away
think,
from us.
Scott, where that barn is that we were talking about.
You
Just
talking
here.
about the barn.
There.
There,
There,
go,
Aaron?
go,
You talking about the barn that had to go
This
right
one.
for the
no,
road.
no,
Left
just that
of-
little strip of land coming down
why am I confused? I'm sorry.
Okay, so.
Why don't you go point
right
to
there.
it?
and go right straight west.
This whole land?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, this land?
What, who owns that? What will happen with that?
This piece right here.
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. That's part of this and this here. So this is Lucille Watkins. This piece is in the Jensen Trust. And this piece is Gordon Alley Trust.
At some future time, if the full road goes through, they'll have to be.
Okay, that's a different piece of property then. I didn't realize.
Right.
that.
It
Okay,
is.
Different than
now I
this
understand.
we're talking
Different
about.
owner anyway.
Right, a whole bunch of different
Okay.
owners.
So, Nan, from what I read and understood, the deal working with this right now is the water concern more than getting the road in.
Correct.
That's
Right,
getting started on the water.
right.
Yeah, I mean, 2,500 would be nice to connect. Obviously, that's why it's master planned, but the water is what is really driving the timeline on this, is it is a very important piece of infrastructure for the city.
And you've talked to the Wybergs?
They're here.
Are you the Wybergs?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to say anything? Are you okay with this idea or not? Or it's not a public hearing, but we're gonna let you say your piece, okay?
You can go up to the mic,
You can
so
come up
it'll
here
be
to
on
the
the
mic.
recording.
Got trees. Okay. Well, we'll see about that. All right, any other? If you don't want to say anything, we're fine.
Please talk to us.
There's
They're good?
there's an agreement that we're working through with
Good.
these folks that will kind of point out some of these specific concessions.
All right,
Aside from this is one of the things that the city is agreeing to do, is to take this through the subdivision process. That's one of our terms in this agreement. But there's more to it in the background to acquire the property.
okay,
And you said that
Great.
building lot will be an acre,
It is an acre, yeah,
so that's a good sized lot.
it is. So it's this is really small. I apologize. The notation is very small, 1.01 acres, and it's got copious frontage. So it definitely meets all of the standards for the subdivision ordinance.
all right. Gavin,
Question. So as I read through this beforehand, it looks like the city will be acting as the developer.
Yeah, it's kind of a partnership where we would be acquiring the land. So the Wybergs would basically authorize us to act as their representative on the property. And then eventually we would close on the property. And one of the terms of the closing would be that we complete this subdivision. So they are the property owners. We are running through the subdivision process as part of our agreed terms of the negotiation. And we're waiving the fees, and we're providing the engineering. We're doing all those things which cost, a considerable amount of money to do something like this. And that's just part of our ability to bring value to the table.
Which we should.
yes. Great. Any other comments, concerns, questions? All right,
I'm
Here.
grateful that there's cooperation between the landowners and the city. Thank you.
all right. I think we're ready to make a positive recommendation, a motion for a positive recommendation.
I'll make a
Who's-
motion for the proposed subdivision concept plan for the Wyberg subdivision.
Second.
All right, it's been proposed and seconded to make a positive recommendation regarding the concept plan for the Wyberg subdivision.
Yes.
Yes, Gavin did. I'm sorry, Teresa proposed, Gavin second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great. Thank you. Wow, okay, let's go on to staff business.
Okay, a couple of items. A big update on the general plan. So this last week, we did hear back from UDOT. They did approve our scope.
Thank you.
Guys. They did approve our scope, which was kind of one of these milestones I was waiting for before we could earnestly move forward with the general plan process. So as you may remember, UDOT is the financial institution that provide us the grant to pay for the general plan. So they have some conditions and some requirements. They required that they review our scope of work and approve that before they would release the grant funds, which is standard. But we did hear back from them, which means that now that our scope is approved, we can release our RFP for the consultant to bid on, or a consultant or multiple. Hopefully we have a few that we can choose from. So that is kind of a milestone that we needed to pass before we could really push forward on this process. So I anticipate we'll probably issue the RFP within the next week or two and leave it out there being advertised for at least a month, maybe a few more days. We'll see, what kind of response we get. But then we'll go through a selection process. And once we select a consultant, then it really is, putting together schedules and committees and really scheduling meetings for specific discussions to go forward with the general plan. Public noticing will occur, so the public will be aware that we're starting this process and that there will be public input sessions throughout the timeline. We'll likely have a website, we'll likely have different input opportunities, whether it's through surveys or through work sessions or open houses. That is yet to be determined, the formal process and what that looks like, but it'll be very open to the public and very public facing. But that's just an update for you guys. That has been achieved and now we can move on. So that's where we are in the general plan.
Great.
Next, there is a staff party on July 17th. It is the Redneck Water Slide. If you guys would like to attend with your families. If you'd like to go, you'll see that in your packet there. There's a little flyer, but if you'd like to go, Marie would like to know by today, if possible, if you'd like to attend. It's a real good time. The kids have tons of fun. There will be dinner and just good outdoor summer fun. So you're welcome to attend if you'd like to. I will not be able to go. I'll be heading home from Island Park. Actually, as soon as this meeting's over, I've got to go pack and then we're leaving tomorrow. So.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, but the kids would love it.
Okay.
Okay. Even if you want to do some spectating, it might be fun to do as well.
Do you go down, Marie? Oh, good. That was a wise choice. All right.
And then last.
That's good.
You could
That's good.
cause some damage.
Yeah.
They do make you sign a disclaimer
They
if you
do.
are gonna
do.
participate, so. Okay, and then lastly, we have the Utah League of Cities and Town Annual Convention coming up in September. That is held down at the Salt Palace, it's September 6th through the 9th. And we do have some training funding available in our budgets. If you guys would like to attend that convention, you're welcome to. Get with us and let us know. Some folks do stay a night or two in a hotel there if you want to make it a full-fledged thing. I typically drive down each day just because it's close enough. I'd rather be home with the family, but you're welcome to do whatever. Just let us know. Scott Bennett, our recorder, usually coordinates the hotel reservation or carpooling or not reservation, but registration fees. So let us know as early as you can if you'd like to attend any of those sessions. You're welcome to do so. It does count towards your annual training if you have training hours, which I don't think anybody really is going to be short on training hours, but
Scott,
Just so
what was
you're
the
aware.
date on that again?
September 6th through the 9th. Their website
Mhm.
doesn't have anything else other than those dates. I don't have any scheduling other than that. We know it's at the Salt Palace and it's the 6th through the 9th of September.
And the title of that conference again?
It's
is-
the Utah League of Cities and Towns
Okay.
Annual Convention. So it's kind of like a standard conference to get together. There's breakout sessions, but it's all municipal governance, land use, water, all sorts of local issues that are discussed. Typically, appointed and elected officials and city staff are who attend that convention. So you guys would fall within that purview and it's beneficial. You usually have some really good keynote speakers. This last conference, they had one of the firefighters who was in one of the stairwells at the World Trade Center who lived through that ordeal. He was there, provided us an account of his experience. So high quality as far as the events. So let us know. It's a good time.
Okay. Great.
Scott, any chance of getting an itinerary for that? An agenda for that?
As soon as it's available, I will for sure. They don't even have that on their website yet, but I wanted to get it out there so you guys could plan it if you'd like to attend.
Okay.
Okay,
And next meeting is August 3rd.
correct.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all our information.
Really good information.
We
this
appreciate
time.
it and appreciate it getting it soon enough to,
Yeah.
especially when there's 49 pages plus to
There's-
read through, you know.
There's a lot going on, but I appreciate you guys reading through it. I've had commissions that show up and thumb through it.
Yeah,
But no, I appreciate you looking at it. So
thanks.
for sure.
A motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second? Everybody
Second.
seconds it.
Second.
Been moved, seconded by Teresa to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I do that. So Gavin caught me on that one. So, all right, let's